Hi, my name is Mike. Welcome to my vlog about football in general and Burnley FC in particular. A vlog that this week has been overtaken by events. Basically, last week I did a vlog, did a piece to camera as I usually do, and when I kind of finished putting it together, I realised that perhaps it was better in a different forum. For example, No Nay Never, the excellent No Nay Never podcast. I've been lucky enough to appear on a few times. Great crew over there. So what I did was I sent it over there, and it was a vlog about the atmosphere at Turf Moor and the advertisement for a drummer, safe standing, why atmospheres are bad at Turf Moor and English football, and so on and so forth. Because it may come to surprise you that these podcasts and vlogs are done by fans out of their own time at their own expense. Unfortunately, it didn't appear on No Nay Never, but the plan always was to do what I called a director's cut and stick it on this particular Out of My Tiny Mind vlog sometime this week. That's just the way it goes, No Nay Never, the crew work incredibly hard. They have not a lot of time, and they have real lives among being Burnley fans. So things that's the way it goes. Anyway. So I've kind of done this director's cut. I was going to put it up later this week, but then the club tonight announced various changes to the atmosphere. They're talking about safe standing. They're talking about, the drummer and all that kind of stuff, and the changes to the atmosphere of the turf. So I'm going to put it up and record this short intro beforehand. I'm going to put it up. Bear with me. Some of the subjects that I'm talking about have kind of moved on in that week. But this is kind of the director's cut of that particular vlog. And hopefully it sort of, provokes some comment. If you have some comment about the atmosphere and how to improve it, then please leave it in the comments box below, and I will respond where I can, because, it's an interesting subject. But there are some things that people sort of say, oh, we'll just do this or we'll just do that. It's not as easy as you think to build an atmosphere, and hopefully I cover that in the vlog that I, did for No Nay Never. Didn't appear, but that's just the way it goes. There may well be a vlog this weekend due to the games and, of course, the return, or not the return, back to Dyche. But in the meantime, enjoy this one. Take care. Hi, this is Mike, and I just thought I'd comment on the news that last week the club put out an advert for someone to become what was presumably the club's sort of semi-official drummer. Now, this is part of an attempt to create a better atmosphere at Turf Moor, which has been particularly flat this season. And presumably the job was to try and build some atmosphere, yet unfortunately it was met with the usual completely predictable over-the-top reaction from some areas. I mean, it's quite impressive. The last 18 months the club has been completely transformed on and off the pitch. We've been relegated, promoted, we have pre-game light shows, YouTubers investing, our American Football Hall of Fame owner in drinking Benny and Hots with the host of the most famous talk show in America, and the thing that is setting people off is a drummer. That's kind of like watching a unicyclist juggling chainsaws on a high wire between two skyscrapers while his jacket's on fire and going, you know what, I definitely don't like the colour of his trousers. They'll say it quietly, but the atmosphere at the turf is sometimes not the best or the most intimidating. Like any football ground, when things are going well, it's a close match, the turf can be a loud and intimidating place, better than most. On certain nights when we send the chance of a big scalp, the crowd can be the difference. But it can also be exceedingly quiet when things are not going well. Now, I don't necessarily mean that as a complete negative. The turf is not the kind of place where the fans turn on the team at the drop of a hat. But it is feeling at the moment that the crowd is trying not to shout at the team, struggling for confidence and deflating them even further. But this raises the question as what really counts as a good football atmosphere? Plenty of people point to Germany or Italy as examples of what we in England should aim for. But let's face it, English football is never going to scale the heights of the Bundesliga or Serie A when it comes to atmosphere. It isn't, it never has. And anyone who tells you that Anfield or St James's Park or Old Trafford matches up to the San Siro on a bad day is lying. Crowd atmosphere, especially in the Premier League, has largely been legislated and gentrified out of the game in the last 30 years. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, given that fans are no longer treated as animals and herded into crumbling death traps. If you're lucky enough to have not experienced a game in the 80s or 90s, imagine the current hassle of attending a game against that lot from Ewood, but every damned week, even if you went to, say, Rotherham. Football atmosphere is a cultural thing that reflects the society of the country and the history of how fans are viewed within football in that country. In Germany, fans have long had a say in the running of their clubs, down to the 50+1 rule. They have power, and it comes across in the way that fans have input into large areas of how their club is run, and their clubs seek that input from those fans. In somewhere like Italy, it's more of a social gathering mechanism, with fans forming specific ultra groups. The upside is incredible displays of banners and noise, as those groups try to outdo each other. The downside is entire areas of the ground where police fear to tread, and those fan groups, often affiliated with criminal or far-right gangs, effectively control ticketing, control standing, even controlling whose turn it is to invade the club training ground to threaten the players after a bad defeat. English football culture reflects, well, English society in general. It's mainly sort of class-based, where football is an entertainment put on for the masses, in much the same way as going to the cinema. Over time, terrace culture evolved through familiarity, but unlike Germany or Italy, that kind of mass congregation and organisation of fans away from the match just doesn't happen here in English football. When it comes to fan groups, probably one of the most well-known is the Holmesdale Ultras of Crystal Palace, who have, granted, raised the noise levels and so on at Selhurst Park. The problem is the name Holmesdale Ultra sounds like a particularly high-end of 1970s leather sofa. But there isn't a single official Burnley FC supporters club run by the club itself, putting on organised travel, providing tickets. Unofficial supporters clubs do that work, but they are small and largely geographically based. So we don't really have that mass of people to organise together who travel as one, who stand as one at the games. There are no huge tifos and displays, no real large movement, and no real way of organising protests. This is why in the English game, when you see protests against managers and chairmen, they're largely people holding up A4 bits of paper. In Italy or Spain, fans can be in groups that are organised enough to ensure that entire stands or stadiums are empty for even the opening 15 minutes of a match. Whereas Manchester United fans aren't organised in a big enough mass to do actions that will force their owners out. And this same lack of critical mass, and more importantly recognition, also means that fans can't organise big enough displays of support. Let's say I wanted to display a flag that covers 2 blocks of the North Stand lower. How do I do that? Forget having to get permission from the club in the first place. How do I communicate with the fans who are in those seats and get it all set up? But the announcement about the drummer and subsequent press release about atmosphere also had people getting onto their favourite hobby horses, which are pyro and safe standing. Pyro is the easy one. Waving a flare is not contributing to the atmosphere, for the same reason that standing there holding a bit of plastic like the Statue of Liberty is not contributing to the atmosphere. Flares fail rule number 1. Do what you want as long as you don't harm others. Flares work in other places such as Eastern Europe, but that is because there's hundreds of them, there's thousands of fans doing it, it's combined with chanting, flags, and hooliganism and racism. One lone flare is not pyro, that's just an annoying vape. Safe standing is a much different issue and much more complex. For the record, I support safe standing in stadiums, and I support the introduction of a safe standing area at Turf Moor. The problem is, in trying to introduce safe standing, clubs and fans are dealing with a much more complex and emotive issue. The law requiring all-seater stadiums came in after the Hillsborough disaster, when 97 Liverpool fans were crushed to death on a standing terrace. Hillsborough is still a complex and emotive subject, and the fact is that the Leppings Lane end was a standing terrace was not the only factor in why and what happened, but it happened, and it could have happened elsewhere. Older fans can remember being in crushes on a fairly regular basis, even when Burnley were in the then 3rd and 4th divisions. I don't think I'm alone in admitting that if you were to show me a picture of a large empty standing football terrace with crush barriers like the old Longside, it would trigger some memories, and some of those are very uncomfortable even 30 odd years on. Stadiums are so much better than the death traps that fans were herded into over 30 years ago. But the campaign for safe standing is fighting that institutional memory, and the people who make decisions of safe standing are people of my age who remember. And that emotion is a strong one for even the best argument to overcome. Like I say, I support safe standing, but if it was introduced, would I stand? No. And that's not just because I'm old and my knees and back are shot. For me personally, it triggers uncomfortable memories of being in crushes at football matches. I don't like being in large gatherings in small spaces because of that. And I'm a nearly 6 foot tall bloke. I can't imagine what it's like for a woman who's 5'6". But my opinion is if the clubs can make it work using the modern designs such as rail seating, then I am all for it, as I have the choice to sit. Standing does contribute to the atmosphere. And safe standing trials have taken place in other stadiums. I suspect that part of the reason why Turf Moor has not been part of that is because the most obvious place to introduce safe standing is the cricket field stand. The problem is that introducing safe standing into the cricket field stand requires renovating an old stand, and that is not a cheap solution. But safe standing is not a simple and easy solution to building an atmosphere. Building an atmosphere is hard. There is no recipe or magic formula. I would love to see huge flags and tifos and huge chanting pre-match. I really would. But then I look at the stands 15 minutes before kick-off, and they are half full. And this is the reason why it's so hard to build atmosphere at Turf Moor. Burnley is a town and a community club with generations of fandom. For many fans, the game is a regular scheduled gathering to see friends and family and catch up, with the game happening around that. It's like going to church, but we all just worship the claret and blue. And because the game is part of a social occasion and not necessarily the focus, does that inhibit the building of an intense atmosphere? Because we gossip and we chat in the pub pre-match and in the concourse 15 minutes before kick-off, how can you build up that pre-match intensity? People are not in the ground an hour beforehand like they used to be because tickets mean there is no rush to get a good place. You know what the North Stand had that the old standing Longside didn't? Concourses. People say that the travelling atmosphere is always better, and that's true, because those things that used to happen at all games happen mainly in away. You've done your social chat on the way to the game. Your pre-match options are much, much more limited. You're likely to be in the ground much, much earlier, and you have that communal feeling of being a football fan. It's as simple as that. But a home game is different. So how do you build an atmosphere when that is sort of the culture? It's a basic question. If part of the atmosphere is having stands half full before kickoff, how do you do that? How do you get people into the ground early? Leave your suggestions and comments because I don't know. Maybe one thing is to get rid of the stupid law about not drinking alcohol at your seat. It only applies to top-level football, and it's one of the most condescending laws in the country. Oh, you follow football. If you have a drink in your hand and even see a football pitch, then you might fly into a rage. That would get people off the concourses and into their seats earlier, probably. But would some bunch of pricks start throwing half-full pint glasses into the air? Yeah. And are they the same people who shout at everyone else for not creating an atmosphere? Probably. On balance, though, that's an actual law, so there's little appetite for actually changing it, and that is really hard. The team does occasionally need a lift, and anything that helps is fine by me. So if the club are trying to raise the atmosphere, even slightly artificially, then why is that a bad thing? Because speaking of artificially raising the atmosphere, if you're complaining about the atmosphere, maybe try a game without the artificial enhancement of a pre-match pint or two and then see if you start singing. Because as I say, building an atmosphere is hard. It depends on so many things: the performance of the team, who the opposition are, the time of day, even the weather. And the mood changes quickly as well. To take a couple of examples against Man City, first game this season, everyone's up for it, they're buzzing. Haaland scores 3 minutes in, the place deflates. But a few years ago, a fairly routine City game, Raheem Sterling misses from 6 inches. The crowd realise it might be our day and absolutely roars the team onto Goodmanson, getting an equaliser. We all admit there's a problem with the atmosphere of the turf at the moment, and the club came out with a minor idea to try and do something about it. And look what the reaction was. It's perhaps indicative of the tensions in the fan base that this idea got slammed so hard and so quickly, but doesn't that kind of prove the point? So if the club trying to do something is bad, then logically it's up to us fans. So if you slated the idea of the drummer and think the atmosphere should come from us fans, then come on then. What's your suggestion?